Good afternoon, everyone. So, welcome to day two of Qiskit Fall Fest 2021, Qftics India. So, I would like to mean after the successful last session, today we have another set of great speakers. We have James Weaver, who is a Qiskit developer at IBM, and we have Brian, who is a quantum education lead at IBM Quantum. We all know James Weaver. He's a great figure in the in the quantum computing community. He has wrote great books and is currently working on a Qiskit book, Qiskit Pocket Guide. He's famous for his projects like Quantum Music Playground and Qiskit block. It would be a pleasure to have him on. It's a pleasure to have him on board, and we expect a great session from him. And Brian, no, and there's no one who is in the quantum community who doesn't know about Brian. He's a community lead at IBM Quantum, and he is the person who actually tries to make quantum fun for the people through the great events he is part of organizing them. So, without wasting for any further time, I would like to invite James and Brian to go ahead with the session. Starting with James, who will be sort of giving a concept about quantum music playground, which is one of his great project, and yeah, looking forward to a great session. Before continuing with the session, I do want to point out one thing that we have sent out mails for the team formation, and we have for the people who requested to be be assigned a random team. We have assigned random team to each participant. Other than that, the participants who are willing to make their own team are free to do so. The deadline for which is 12 a.m. today. So you can go ahead and check your mail, and if you have any queries, you can type it out the team formation channel for the Discord channel. Thank you. Now proceeding with the event.
Hi, thanks, Abigail. Yeah, my name is James Weaver, and I'm going to be talking with Brian Ingmanson about Quantum Music Playground for the first hour here, and then we're going to talk about Qiskit blocks. And both of those projects are ones that that I created to help people learn about quantum computing in the context of Qiskit. And so first, Quantum Music Playground. The slides that I'm using are at this link here. Abigail, can you see my screen?
Yes, James, your screen is visible.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. It's at these slides, and here's a screenshot of Quantum Music Playground. And what it is it's a playground. It's a music compositional tool that you can use to create music using quantum states. And it's implemented as in Ableton Live, which is a digital audio workstation. It's implemented as a Max for Live device, and it includes a micro Qiskit quantum simulator in it. So you're actually dealing with quantum circuits and states while you're using Quantum Music Playground. And it is free and open source. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, that's a URL that you can use to go to the project and learn more about it. As a matter of fact, if I go to this URL, then what I see is, let's see, well, I'll just go ahead and go to that URL. What I see is this GitHub repo, and there's the source code for the project. But then also there's a very long tutorial that will go into a lot of all the concepts really that Brian and I are going to talk about today. And you can go deeper into them and learn how to compose music very deeply with this tool, and using that documentation and tutorial. There's lots of videos and things that have examples. A little bit about me. Abigail did a great job of introducing me. I have been a IBM Quantum Developer Advocate for over 3 years now. Before that, and actually still, I'm a Java champion. So I've kind of got my feet in both worlds of classical and quantum computing development. I'm a developer, author, and speaker. Please reach out if you'd like at this email address. I've written several books, the most recent one being the Qiskit Pocket Reference that I'm writing with Frank Harkins. a colleague on my team. So the big idea was to help people get intuition about quantum states by being able to hear a quantum state. And so I wanted to create a device that we could use to compose music from quantum states. So the composer would, the person composing the music would create a circuit or several circuits, one circuit for each clip that's in the music that they're composing, and those circuits would be state vectors. And then I wanted to be able to then render that state vector musically. So this is an example of, you've probably seen quantum music, or sorry, you've seen the IBM Quantum Composer. And as you know, that there are gates and there are quantum circuits and state vectors here. So I'd like to go to that. If we see this link down, if you go to this link down here, you'll go to the Quantum Composer. And as you know, you can drag and drop gates onto the wires of the Quantum Composer. And as we do that, we have 2 to the n number of basis states as we do wires. The highest occupied wire here is Q3, which is the fourth wire. So we have 2 to the 4th power basis states numbered from 0, 0, 0, 0 to 1, 1, 1, 1. And because we've used Hadamard gates, we've put all of those into equal superpositions. So they each have some probability of being selected when measured, when you measure this quantum state. Each has an equal probability of being the result of that measurement. But also notice that each one, if I hover over that, each one has a phase angle of 0. And if I'm going to render this into musically, each one of these phases would then be the same pitch or the same instrument when it plays. You could picture each of these as a 16th note in music, in Western music anyway. Each one of these would be, in a tala, for example, and if I'm talking about Indian classical music, each one would be, a beat in a tala, maybe a adi tala if it's 8 beats or etc. But each one of these would be one beat, 1/16th note. But because they're all the same phase, they would all be the same pitch or the same instrument. But if I change the phases of these states, then I could make them play different notes. For example, maybe I could drag some of these phase gates down here and notice that the phases are starting to change. Here we've got a pi phase, which is a 180 degree phase. Or here, as I drag more onto here, maybe I'll put a phase gate here and give it a pi over 8 rotation. You can see that now all of my basis states have different phases, and it looks a little bit like a kid's toy, maybe a kid's toy musical instrument, where they hit it with a mallet, and each one of these things has a different pitch. So going back to the presentation then, we could think of these as notes in a musical composition, and the phases then are prescribe the pitch that we'll be playing, And then if we go to the Quantum Music Playground, here's a screenshot with the same circuit here. We could see how we could then render the circuit, the state vector, as pitches. So here we would play a scale, or a raga if you prefer. And so I'll go now to Quantum Music Playground. And it is, by the way, implemented as a Max for Live device. And I'll show that to you here. I want to make it a little bit bigger so that you can see it a little better. It's down here at the bottom. So there's Quantum Music Playground. And I'll go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and I'll go through the process here of making a new track, and so that I can play what you just saw in that state vector. So I'm going to go ahead and add a track, and I'll put a piano on it. So here we will create a MIDI track, and then I'm just going to create a clip here in that track, and I'm going to call it scale. And then I will I'll put a piano on that scale, or a piano on that track. So let's go over here to instruments, and let's see, instrument rack, go find a piano and keys, maybe just a grand piano. Yeah, here we go. So I'll put that over here. And then I'll go to Quantum Music Playground. I'll hit Load Clips. And then I'll look for the scale. We see the scale clip. That scale clip is this scale clip. So I'm able to, for all of these clips, I'm able to compose the music that's going to be played in that particular clip by using this quantum circuit. So I go ahead and create that same quantum circuit that we saw just a second ago, in which we have 4 wires in equal superposition, and then we've got some phase gates. Notice how these are changing here. So let's see. I'll put another phase gate here, and I'm going to change that phase to a pi/8 rotation. Let's see. I'm going to change this to be a T gate. Okay. So you see that, and I'm going to change the octave here. I'm going to make it a little bit higher so we can hear it a little bit. The pitch is a little bit higher, and then I'll go ahead and play that. So let's see. I need to mute this. Find my controls here. I'm just going to play only that scale. So I'm going to solo this track. And then when I play it, it's rendering those pitches in that scale, each one being a 16th note. So that's the idea. And as Brian starts talking about things here, he's going to go into detail on how you can create beats with this, create great percussion. And then I'm going to come back later and add some melodic touches to the composition that Brian creates. You know, Brian's already been introduced once by Abhigan. I'm just going to say that Brian is a dear colleague that I've had the pleasure of working with. He was a school teacher, and so he's a fantastic educator, and that's going to come through when he teaches you about quantum music playground and making beats. He's also a very seasoned percussionist, has a deep background in making beats with drum kits, and so he's the perfect person to talk about this to you. So it's with my pleasure that I introduce Brian Ingmanson.
Thank you very much, Jim. I am thrilled to be here, thrilled to be with everyone here at the Fall Fest. Looking forward to talking with you all about how to make some actual drum loops, some beats using the Quantum Music Playground. Appreciate both introductions I got. So I'm not going to say too much about myself, but I will just say everyone who is here as part of this Fall Fest hackathon, this is really the first time we've done something like the Fall Fest, have this truly global series of events. So you being here, you participating is making it way more likely that we get to do this again. Thank you for being here. Super excited to keep going. Okay, so let's talk about some music. I have my Ableton Live situation already set up here just because my computer is a little slow, so I didn't want to do it live, but I have my Quantum Music Playground way over here in my leftmost track. If you all remember, the way you do that is you drag that Quantum Music Playground file and you drop it right on that track. So that's how you start setting everything up. Then I just use the built-in Ableton tools here. I drag some 808 core kits onto each of these different lines here. And I added a different part of the instrument to each line. So using the Quantum Music Playground, if you're already familiar with something like Ableton, it's important to note that instead of putting all of your different instruments within the kit on the same line, you're going to want to separate them out into different full instruments. And what I mean by that is, let's see here if I can show you. See it? There's all these different slots right here that I'm scrolling through. I'm very zoomed in, so it might look a little different. But you could, on this one core kit, right, bass and then snare and then hi-hats. But when it comes time to actually put all of these sounds together and layer them on top of each other, that's not the best way to do it. So this is what I would recommend for you all. Once you add all these different, you right click on an area, you put insert MIDI clip file, and then you name it whatever you want. Once you have all of those added to your Quantum Music Playground, you would go back to the Quantum Music Playground, double click on that to see the playground itself down here, and you load those clips in. Once you load them in, you have access to all of them right here, as we saw earlier from James. So what are we going to do here? Let's start with our bass drum. Our bass and our snare, those are the two foundational elements of any good beat. And to start, all I want is a nice, easy boom clap beat. Think in your head, what's a boom clap beat? Just think about it for like 1 second. It probably starts with a boom and then goes to a clap. Very simple beat, very simple beat. Bass drum plays on the 1s and 3s. Snare plays on the 2s and 4s. All right, so if I want my bass drum to play on the 1s and 3s, well, in our Quantum Music Playground, everything is set up as 16th notes, right? So here is my circuit with qubit 0, 1, 2, and 3. And down here, like you were seeing earlier from James, all of these options, all these state vector options show you what each beat of the measure would be, subdivided into 16 notes. So if you look at all of our different possible state vectors, our 16 possible outcomes here, we've got 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. You can walk through the entire the entire measure just from looking at these state vectors. And so knowing that and knowing how we create different circuits here or different outcomes in the quantum composer or using Qiskit, I know that I don't want this to play on every single beat, right? You saw earlier that when a state vector is expressed or when it is part of the circuit you've created, that's when a note is triggered. So if I'm only expressing the state vectors, or if I'm only writing my circuit to get the state vector of 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, and 1, 1, 0, 0. If those are the only ones that I am trying to illustrate, well, then look at what I've got here. I've got 1 E and A. It plays on the 1. Then it plays on the 2 E and A, 3, 4. So we've got our downbeats covered right here. Okay, so all I had to do was put a Hadamard on qubit 3 and qubit 2. But again, let's step back one more step. If you have no idea what I even just did, like if you're like, okay, I get that you're dragging and dropping these things, but how is that even making sense? When you put a Hadamard on one of these qubits, we're saying to that qubit, you are in a superposition. You have an equal probability that when we measure you, you can be either a 0 or you can be a 1. So what these state vectors are showing us is, where is this circuit true? Where is it being expressed as true? Well, if both Hadamard gates can be a 0, then 0, 0, 0, 0 is a possible option. So our state vector there is present. Now 0, 0, 0, 1. Okay, why is that one not present? Well, when we're writing our circuits out here, we are reading them from left to right. So when we read qubit 3, that is the leftmost qubit here, the leftmost binary digit. When we read qubit 2, it's the next one in. So here's qubit 3, then qubit 2. And let me zoom in on this just to really make this point. So this is qubit 3, this is qubit 2, this is qubit 1, and this is qubit 0. So we're reading from left to right just like that. So because of that, we're not doing anything to qubit 0 or qubit 1. So there's never going to be a situation where those qubits could be a 1, which is why this one has a 1, so not going to be expressed. This one has a 1, not going to be expressed. These both have 1s, not going to be expressed, because we're not doing anything to qubit 0 or 1 to have those state vectors show up. So I hope I've illustrated that point a little bit for you all. I'm now going to go back to Ableton and show you how easy that is to put in place. So here we are back in our Quantum Music Playground. I have my bass drum sound selected, and I am going to put a nice 4 on the floor for that bass drum, just like you saw me do here, right? Play on the 1, 2, 3, 4, and nowhere else. That's in drumming, that's called a 4 on the floor. Because as you can imagine, we're putting 4 beats on our floor drum, aka our bass drum. All right, so as soon as I click the Hadamard on qubit 3, you see the Quantum Music Playground here expands, right? The highest qubit that you place a gate on determines how expansive your grid is. So if I put it on qubit 3, that gives us those 16 basis states, those 16 options for our state vector, which means now we're perfectly subdivided into 16 16th notes. Simple, right? I put my next Hadamard gate on qubit 2, and you can see now we have our 4 on the floor right here. Let's play it. Nice and easy. We've got a simple 4 on the floor bass drum beat happening here. Okay, one thing I want to do, every time you make a new instrument here, when it initializes, velocity is turned on. This essentially is a way to control how loud your music or your notes are expressed. I don't want to deal with velocity for today, so I'm going to turn that off on all the things I do. But okay, we need a snare drum now. We need that clap, right? We need that sizzle. So the first thing to know is every time you initialize a sound, it always initializes at the lowest energy state, which means on our options over here, right from 0 all the way up to 15, the bass drum is 0. So that's the lowest state. So even though I want this to be my snare drum, what I need to do is go in and physically change the phase. So that phase, you can, when you click on phase here, you have the phase shifter, and you can move that up to the instrument you want it to be set at. So I'm going to put that, move it right on snare drum, and then I'm going to lock it in by clicking back on pitch. Also, you may have noticed as I'm moving around within Ableton, and especially within the Quantum Music Playground, I have this bottom left box here, the info view. This is super helpful because not only does this tell you all the different things within Ableton and what they do, but James also, when he created the Quantum Music Playground, coded all the different aspects of the playground to display their tutorial in that same little box at the same time. So if you're in here and you kind of forget what one of these things does or what legato means, you've got a great little tutorial there to remind you as you're working within the Quantum Music Playground. Highly recommend. Okay, back to our snare drum music. So our snare drum, we want that to happen on the 2 and 4. Right, you ever been to like a party before and like music's playing and there's those people that are clapping on the wrong beat? Everyone else is like, okay, 2, 3, 4. And you got that one person that's like, that is not what we want to do. We are not that type of percussionist around here, okay? We put our snare drums on the proper 4 on the floor beat, which is going to be on the 2s and 4s. Let's go back to IQX to figure out how to do this. All right, so if I only want my snare drum to be played on beat 2, which is this, and beat 4, which is this. So amplitude of 0, 1, 0, 0, and 1, 1, 0, 0. So how can I do this by just using Hadamards? Well, I can't. I actually need more than just a Hadamard to do this. So you saw when I put just a Hadamard on qubit 3, it plays at 0, 0, 0, 0 and 1, 0, 0, 0, which is what we wanted, right? That's what putting a Hadamard on this qubit does. It enables our leftmost qubit to be either a 0 or a 1. So how do I make that happen on the 2s and 4s? Well, let me mess around. If I put my Hadamard on qubit 2 instead, does that make it happen? No, now it just plays on 1 and 2 and not 3 or 4. Okay, what if I put it up here on qubit 1? No, okay. So when I'm moving my Hadamard around, you could see it's changing the space between which notes get played. So if I put my Hadamard only on qubit 0, I'm playing on 1E and then nothing for the rest of the measure. If I put it on qubit 2, I'm now playing on 1, 2, and nothing for the rest of the measure. Interesting. This is going to be helpful for us as we move forward and helpful for you as you mess around and try to figure out how to make that perfect beat. Okay, so I know I want on the 2 and the 4, which this is the proper space, right? 1, E, and 2, E, and 3, E, and So this is the proper spacing for 2 and 4, but now I need to shift these somehow. Within our Quantum Composer and within the Quantum Music Playground, you can use the NOT gate or the X gate to shift what's going on. So what do I mean by that? Well, a NOT gate is just a classic bit flip. It takes a 0, turns it into a 1, takes a 1, turns it into a 0. So here's what I need to do, right? If I need to get this from 0, 0, 0, 0 to play instead on this note, 0, 1, 0, 0, well, I could put a bit flip on that second qubit, right? That's going to turn this from a 0 to a 1, and it will always be a 1. Let's try it. Boom. There we go. I've used that bit flip. I've used that X gate to shift where our beat will be felt. Let's go back to Ableton. Within our snare drum, putting that Hadamard on qubit 3, then putting our X gate on qubit 2. Now we have the shift. Let's hear it. Okay, very good, very good. Now, if you can make this beat, you can make any beat. This is the key to being a drummer. If you let the other people just play, just sit behind them, get on your set, just feel in your pocket and just be hitting 4 on the floor. It goes with almost any type of music. But we're not here to make just any type of music. We're here to make some sweet trance music. So let's do that. Okay. What do I need to do that? Well, I need a little bit more going on. We're going to move next to our hi-hats. And by the way, if you do have any questions during this, feel free to put them in the chat. Interrupt me. I know I've had a little bit of coffee, so if you want to interrupt, just please do. Okay, let's get our hi-hat moving. So when we have a new instrument, what's the one thing we got to remember? We need to initialize it the proper way. I'm going to go turn off velocity. You can see my hi-hats are at the bass drum, so I'm going to click on phase. I'm going to bring that up to the closed hi-hat and then go back to pitch to lock it in. Boom, now we're in the right place. So for my hi-hats, what do I want to do? Well, I think what I want to do is I want to make a nice like moving hi-hat beat. I want all 16th notes to be played for the hi-hat. So you've already seen how to do that. I put a hat mark on qubit 3, 2, 1, and 0. And now all of my 16th notes will be expressed, right? Because every qubit between qubit 0, 0, 0, 0 and qubit 1, 1, 1, 1, they all have a chance to be expressed because we have a Hadamard on every one of those qubits, aka we're expressing everything. Let's get a little bit more interesting though. So you saw earlier, James used those phase gates, these light blue gates here. He used them to rotate up the scale, right? He turned it from one note playing 16 times to 16 different notes being played up and down the scale. I'm going to use phase gates too, but I'm going to use them a little bit differently here. Because if you look, our 16 different notes aren't actually notes. When you're using one of the drum kits, they are the different instruments. So instead of making it move from a B flat to a C, we're now moving from a closed hi-hat to a conga. Okay, cool. We could work with this. Now, if you look, the open hi-hat is conveniently 1, 2, 3, 4 steps above the closed hi-hat. Or, you know, we're going to be using these light blue phase gates to shift 4 steps around our rotation. So what I want to do is I want to get an open hi-hat on just the upbeat. I want it to sound just like that. So I'm going to use this S gate here. And what I'm going to do is put it on qubit 1. Now you can see I've shifted up. So some play on the open hi-hat, some play on the closed. But I want it to sound even better than that. I want this crisp, okay? I want my open hi-hat just needs to be the little, I only want it on the upbeat, not on the 1E and beat. So get rid of that beat. So what we're going to do that is a little fancy, but actually not that fancy at all once you start understanding what's going on here. We're going to first utilize this control modifier. And again, if you don't know what it does, well, if you highlight over it and then read in the bottom corner there, this control modifier is super useful, okay? We put this in one of our columns. You could see the timeline is built into these columns as well as the rows, right? You put it into one of those columns, and an X gate or a phase gate placed in that same column only operates when the row that this is in currently is a 1. Okay, so what do I mean by that? I mean, if I put this S dagger gate here, and then I put a control modifier in the same column, what I'm doing is saying, hey, this S dagger is only going to be expressed when this qubit is expressed as a 1. And I will pause for just a second there, kick back, make sure, James, if I said that wrong, feel free to jump in and correct me. But I do think that's, at least for our sake, where we need to be. Okay, I think we're good.
You're good, man. You're good.
Okay, perfect. I know it's a little tougher to swing to you during StreamYard here, but thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so we've got our beat now. Or really, we've got the core tenets of a beat, right? We got our boom clap, and then we've got our hi-hat moving us along. So we've got some drive to it. We've got our beats where we want them. But that's not it. We got to go a little bit further. We got to, as Emeril Lagasse would say, we got to spice it up a notch here. So we are going to add some auxiliary percussion into our song here. Making sure I'm in my Quantum Music Playground. I go to my auxiliary percussion. And what I want to add actually is some claves. So, okay, turn off velocity, go to my phase, shift it all the way up to the very top. Phase shift all the way up to the claves. Lock that in. I want to get a nice little clave sound. Okay, and for this, I want to have my claves do one thing during the first measure and a different thing during the second measure. Ooh, we haven't talked about that yet. You could actually use the Quantum Music Playground to have more than one measure be expressed. So how do you do that? Well, if putting a Hadamard gate on the different qubits determines how many notes are shown, right? So by putting my Hadamard on qubit 3, I have 16 notes shown here. Well, if I put a Hadamard on the next qubit, now I have 32 notes shown. So I have 30-second notes. Well, actually, no. You don't have 30-second notes. When you go above 16 subdivisions, instead of it subdividing further into 30-second notes, it doubles the length. So every one of these dots is still 1/16th note in length, but now you have 32 of them, aka you have 2 bars of music right here, which means we could do something in the first bar, which is illustrated by this section, and something different in the section bar, or something different in the second bar, which is this section. All right, so what do we even want to do? Well, let's take our Hadamard gate and put a control gate on that same type of control we used. And okay, so now I'm playing on the 1, the 3, the 1E of the next measure, and the 3E of the next measure. Let's hear just my aux. Let's hear just what that sounds like. Okay. So we're using our control modifier here for syncopation. We're using this to create a little bit of movement within our phrase that wasn't there before. This is pretty simple. Again, I don't want to ever make that core drummer sin of putting my important hits on the 2/4 into something like a trance beat where it shouldn't be there. So I'm going to move that. Sorry, I said the 2/4. I meant putting on the 1/3 is the wrong thing to do. We're going to move it to the 2/4. So I'm going to use an X gate just like I did earlier, and I'm going to shift my clave pattern to be on the 2/4 beats. Now let's hear it with everything together. All right, so we have that clave hiding behind the snare in the first measure, which is kind of where I want it. In the second measure, it's just popping out. It's just making itself known enough to be something that, you know, piques your ear, says, oh, okay, that's cool. I like what's going on there. Next up, let's get some congas going. And we're going to do the same type of thing with the congas. We are going to have them span across 2 different measures here. So I'm going to put my Hadamard gate on qubit 4 to give us 2 measures in our Quantum Music Playground, and 3 and 2, because I want a good amount of notes here. And what I want to do with my congas is I want to use some X gates at the same time that I'm using a combination of control modifiers here. So without using any control modifiers yet, what have I done? You know what I did is I forgot how to initialize. That's what I did. I make this mistake at least once every time I've done this. So here we go. Okay. In my congas, I go to phase. I use my phase shifter. I'm going to bring them to the, oh, I shouldn't be doing this while it's playing. Hold on. Pretend you didn't see that. Okay. I go to my phase shifter and I want them to be on the mid conga. There we go. Okay. There it is. Now we've got the sound we're looking for, or at least one of them. Because you can see in the congas, we have both mid, low, and high congas all here that you can play on. So this is one of those cases where you could create a new file here for, you know, high congas, mid congas, low congas, but I'm going to try to do it all together in the same MIDI file. I'm going to try to use a phase gate here, and with combination with my control modifiers, I'm going to use a phase gate and control modifiers to move that around within here. All right, so right now it's playing on the of every beat, right? Not where we want it quite. So let me grab some control modifiers. Drop one here, drop one here, drop one here. Okay, now we've got it looks like it's playing on the 1E and 2E and 3, 4E. Nice, okay. I love that. Okay, so a few things that just happened here, right? One is the best way to learn using the Quantum Music Playground is to read that tutorial that James wrote on GitHub. I swear, you know, I'm not the reading type normally. I'm always like, oh, let me watch something, I could do it. But reading in his tutorial about all the different ways that you can use things like these control modifiers for syncopation is crucial to figuring out what you're doing here. And second, probably the second best way to learn is just to get in here and mess around, okay? Listen to the interplay between our claves and our congas now. Isn't that cool? We've got a little like call and response. I love that. I love that little call and response we got moving here. But like I said, I want to actually get some movement between the congas and the high and low. So I'm going to use a phase gate. And this phase gate is going to shift the sound up to the high conga for part of it. Let's hear that. All right, very cool, very cool. The only thing I don't like is that at the very end of the phrase, I don't like that it just goes da-doom, da-doom. Like I feel like that's just a little too staccato of a way to end. So I'm going to use some of these anti-control modifiers, which do the opposite as a control modifier. You know, instead of it only expressing when there's a 1, this only expresses when there's a 0. And I'm going to put that on my highest qubit because I know that's going to affect what's happening at the end of my phrase. And let me also put one on qubit 3 and see what that does. Okay, let's play. Yeah, okay, I like that a lot better. All right, so we've got some fun movement there going between the 3 congas and actually between the tom and the conga. Sorry, I moved it all the way up there, but I like that even better. And I like that it doesn't end on that weird da-doom. I like that it's more of a and one sound. I think that flows better. Oh, my crash cymbal. Let me go to my crash cymbal here. My crash cymbal, all I want my crash cymbal to do is play one time and then go away because I don't want it to be repeating every single time we hear it. And I only want it to play on the downbeat. So I actually don't need to do anything on my circuit here because every qubit initializes at 0, which means it's already going to play on that downbeat because that's 0, 0, 0, 0. I do need to make sure that I shift this all the way up to B on the cymbal. And I do want to ask it to just play one time only. So I'm going to click one shot here. That's going to make our beat only play one single time. That's exactly what I want. Okay. Okay, one last thing here, one last thing. I want to add some crazy bass drum to this. This is the very last thing I'm going to do with my beat before I think it's all done. What I mean by that is my current bass drum, it's, you know, utilitarian. It's doing its job. It's doing what it's supposed to do. But I am going to right click, make a new MIDI clip. I'm going to make this offbeat bass because I want this bass to be jumping around. I want this to have almost like a ba 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 ba, like some type of weird movement underneath everything. So let me load my clips in because I just added a new one. Every time you add a new instrument or move everything around, you gotta reload them in. Okay, here's my offbeat bass. And because it's a bass drum, it initializes right where I want it to, right on the bass. I'll turn off velocity. For this last part here, I'm actually going to do something that many of you might be familiar with. You might know the quote, "Good artist copy, great artist steal." Well, I'm going to steal from one of the great artists. He's on this call right now, James Weaver, ladies and gentlemen. He created this exact circuit that I'm going to write for you right here, right now. This is something that he created for one of his trance songs that maybe, if you're lucky, he'll tell you about later. I am going to recreate the exact same circuit on my bass drum because it is the exact sound I want. And you could see as I'm clicking within here, the Quantum Music Playground automatically resizes as I get further along my timeline here. Just a good little tip for you that it will automatically resize. Okay, so thank you to James for giving me this great beat here because this is what I want. Let's hear just what that offbeat snare sounds like. Or sorry, offbeat bass. All right, so you put that together now with everything. Let's hear it all together. That's great. I'm happy with that. All right, folks. Well, that is how you go from a very simple beginner beat to creating your own fire beats here within the Quantum Music Playground. I would love to hand it back to James now to lead you through, taking a beat and putting music on top of it. But I'm thrilled that you all were joining us for this. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll hand it back to James to run you through the end of the presentation.
There are a few questions, Brian.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So but I think you answered most of them during your present of your session, basically. So the first question would be that is this kind of a quantum extension to the original classical application? That would be yes. You can say this is sort of an you can say extension to I think the Alberton Live platform, right? This
Yes.
extension.
Yeah, this was built. The Quantum Music Playground was built within the Max for Live kind of frameworks, but it uses a micro Qiskit. I'm saying this wrong. I'm sorry, but it's built on top of micro Qiskit, so it is sampling from true quantum computing. Although, as you could imagine, we're not running these circuits on a real device in real time because that would just take a little bit too much time. So it's all simulated.
Special local simulator. Cool. And then your question, and it's a pretty good question. How would you make melody? Isn't quantum too random to achieve this feat?
Great question, which is a perfect segue actually back to James, because making melody is not something that is overwhelming, especially because we are using simulations here. You can come up with and kind of craft your own melody in pretty unique ways, and you could sample them within Ableton as well. So I won't say too much more about it because James is about to walk you through how to actually do that.
And the last question was Udita Das asked that quantum measurement should destroy all the quantum properties, right? So how do we achieve this feat?
Yes.
You did mention, right?
Yeah, that's totally correct. When you measure it, it will defeat all the quantum properties. But like we were saying, it's actually not it's not the superposition that we are worried about. It's these state vectors that show what will be played. So we are not measuring our circuit to decide what gets played. We are using the state vectors as an indication where a note should be played or what the note should be.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think that would be all the questions for now. Now I would like to invite James to continue with the session.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. Wonderful job. You set things up well for what I'm going to be dealing with now, which is the melodic part of this. So I'm going to go to Quantum Playground here. And I'm just going to build on top of what Brian did. So this is the beat that Brian created. I'll go ahead and play it here. Abhigan, are you able to hear that?
Yes, James, you're audible.
Okay. All right, great. So to address one of the questions as far as quantum measurement, so you'll notice that we're dealing with a state vector. Let's see here. So even in this example here, where we've got a state vector and we've got different phases represented, and each one of these has an equal probability of being measured. As Brian mentioned, for what we've shown so far, we're actually not taking any measurements. We are instead, because we're dealing with a simulator, we have the ability to know exactly what the state vector is. And so we're just kind of reaching in and cheating nature a little bit, because a real state vector, and for real quantum states, we can't know exactly what the state vector is. We can only measure it and then try to figure it out. But since we're dealing with a quantum simulator, we can know exactly what the state vector is. And so that's what we use then to render the notes and the phase using the phases. So I hope that helps a little bit. So now I'm going to go over to live again, and I'm going to add just a little bit of finishing touches as far as like some melody things to Brian's composition. So first thing I'm going to do is going to add some chords, some jazz chords to it. And so I've created a clip called Jazz Chords that uses just an instrument that just plays some jazzy chords. And now I'm going to, using Quantum Music Playground, tell it what the root note of each of those chords are going to be in my progression. And so, as always, when we use Quantum Music Playground, we take gates and put them on the circuit. Here, I'm going to create a melody that's about 32 beats long here, or 32 subdivisions long of 16th notes. So a couple of measures, and I'll go ahead and change the phases here a little bit so that we can get different notes out of it. But first, I'll just go ahead and play what we've got so far. I'll unmute this jazz chords track and play it with the rest of it. So we can hear a little bit of a jazz chord here, but they're all on the same note. They all have the same root pitch. So I'll use the phase gates then to rectify that. I'll put a T gate there, and notice that these two go up. And then I'll put another gate here, a phase gate, but then I'll change the phase to 1/8. So now we have this nice smooth progression, this jazz progression, going from a C major 7 chord to a D minor 7 chord, etc. So now that we have that, I've got another track here that's got a lead. It's a little bit of a bendy synthesizer kind of lead. And for that, I'm just going to have it do, just play around with a melody here. And so again, I'll put a Hadamard gate on gate 5 here to make it have 32 beats here. And maybe just stick some Hadamard gates here. And so we see a little bit of a rhythmic pattern here, but it's all on the C notes. So if I went ahead and started things up again, it's just all on C. What? And so, so we'll go ahead and make it change pitches a little bit, just playing around with that. So here we go. So you can just kind of mess around, let the quantum state kind of sound like what it wants to, and then tweak it a little bit to where you are actively kind of co-creating, co-composing music with the Hilbert space, with the helping it to sound like it wants to sound, but then you kind of tweaking it to where you're making it sound a little bit closer to the way you want it to sound. And so that's kind of a creative process that you can think about when using this tool, Quantum Music Composer, Quantum Music Playground. There's lots of different options over here on the left that Brian talked about, by the way. When I'll just kind of play this again and talk about some of those. Maybe I'll turn the volume down a little bit. So over here is legato. If I don't do legato, then it has more of a staccato feel. And one of the questions that you had was, well, what about random, the randomness of quantum? So if you click this stochastic button, then for each one of these notes that it's going to play, it actually measures the quantum state and then samples it and then plays that note instead. And so here, so each time I hit stochastic, it does that many measurements, and then will randomly, based upon the quantum state measurements, it'll then play random notes, stochastic. It's because it's then leveraging quantum measurement. And then we also have, instead of scales here, we could use ragas. And so many of you may be familiar with Indian classical music like Hindustani or Carnatic music if you're from South India. There's both have as have the concept of ragas, and a lot of the film songs of today have their roots in Hindustani or Carnatic music. And so I became very, very interested in in Indian classical music. Actually, I've been interested in it for a long time. But when I created Quantum Music Playground, I created a lot of capabilities for Indian classical music into it, including the idea of ragas. So if we go here with ragas, then we can choose one of any one of the 72 ragas that are in Carnatic music, Melakata ragas, and then we can also, to support Indian classical music and the talas, the different beat cycles. I added the ability to have a cycle that's not some power of 2, and then also like an inner cycle and an outer cycle. So, you could play with those. You could transpose into different keys. You could go to different octaves, things like that. If I go back to the tutorial for Quantum Music Playground, I'd just like to survey this a little bit. I can go through here, down through here, and this goes through a lot of the things that Brian talked about. And it also shows you how to install it. And then goes through making beats, choosing instruments and pitches, and just goes through a lot of all the gates that he talked about, plus a lot more, in order to be able to create beats and melodies, and a lot of the things about the phase gates and control gates, things like that. And then there's a whole section here about Indian classical music, and I would encourage you to kind of play with that. Here's, implementing time cycles and selecting ragas. And so here's just an example. Here's a video of Sarali Varadashai 1, which is one of the, it's just one of the, it's one of the exercises that students of Carnatic music play or sing. And so that particular example then is just an example of how you would use Quantum Music Playground then to create that. Okay. So now go back to the presentation. And I guess at this point I would want to know if you have any questions.
We have one new question, you can say, sorry, 2 questions. One I missed in the last session. So Sarthak asked that is the node display the sort of display we had?
Are there any? Okay. Is the node display a sort of density matrix? Yeah, it is. A density matrix, of course, has the capability of showing mixed states, right? Representing mixed states. So everything that we're dealing with here is a pure state. So it's a the display is a histogram, like you would see in the composer, in the IBM Quantum Composer, or some of the displays that you would see if you're using Qiskit from a notebook, right? Some of the Matplotlib things as a notebook. So, but yeah, it is it's a density matrix without the additional dimension that allows it to show mixed states. That's very good. Any other questions?
Yeah, we have another question by
Okay, so yeah, what are we trying to achieve via this? Right, so it's a couple of things. Well, actually more than one thing. One thing is education, learning, like helping people understand this technology. So even, when the first computers were coming out back in the 1940s, one of the first things they did when they were trying to help people understand them is to play games, use computers to play games, to help people see that they're fun and also be able to understand them, but also music. So one of the first computers ever was used to compose music in the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana, and that just helped people to take this, what could be some scary technologies, and then do something that's familiar to them, to create music in this case. But also, as you've seen, the way that you compose music, you do that with gates and state vectors. And so the act of composing music helps the composer, the person doing the composition, it helps them understand how to manipulate a state vector. Like when you're creating a quantum algorithm, you need to be able to know what the effective gates are going to be as you're setting up your circuits, and you need to know what the effects are going to be in the state vector, so that you can set up the right, the desired superpositions and entanglement, and many times, more importantly, the interference patterns, so that then your algorithm can come up with the right answer. So in playing around with this, in creating, putting H gates and phase gates and C naught gates and other kinds of gates in the circuit, and then trying to make it do certain things in the music, right? Because of how it's going to play the state vector, it is just naturally giving you an intuition on the effect of the gates on the circuit and how that affects the state vector. Like just a simple example, when Brian showed you about putting an H gate on the highest wire, the highest number wire, then you could see that puts that high wire into a superposition, so that then every basis state, no matter whether it's, no matter what, has some kind of probability of being selected. So anyway, that's the idea. And then the another, like a real world application, is that there are lots of different kinds of music where this is very, if you think about the repetitive, like the modularity of music, right? A lot of the music that is created nowadays with electronic dance music tends to be loop oriented, and a lot of music tends to be in the number of beats tends to be some power of 2. And so it's a very natural thing to be able to, to just create quantum circuits that do looping beats. And so it's actually a very natural and fun way of creating electronic dance music. So anyway, that's a long answer to a short question, Aman, but thank you for the question. Any other questions?
I mean, we have a last question. It's not sort of a question, but I mean, just fun to add. So, can we render these
we
files
render
to
these files into MP4 format? Quantum music as ringtone is cool. Nice. Udita Das. Very good. Yeah. In Ableton Live has the ability to export, and I'm sure that you could get there pretty easily. Exporting it somehow into MP4. Awesome. It's a great idea. By the way, if anybody here does create some beats or music or whatever, a composition, I'd love to hear it, and perhaps even link to it from the Quantum Music Playground site as an example of a composition. So do play around with it. I mean, one of the reasons I'm bringing it up is there's probably a lot of options you have for doing things in your hackathon, and one of it either in the hackathon, I think it would fit, but or even just for the fun of it, if you created a composition, a musical composition, that'd be really cool. It'd be very, very nice, and I'd love to hear it. Any other questions?
No, that's it for now. Thank you, James, for answering the questions.
Okay, Abigail, I don't hear any more questions. Should we proceed to the second thing, which is Qiskit blocks, or do you want to take a little break first, or what do you want to do, Abigail?
I mean, it's totally up to you. I mean, because the session is going to be recorded
I
anyway.
can't hear you.
Yeah. Am I audible? Hello? 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 Am I audible? Hello?
Okay, I'm going to put in the chat here. Can you hear me? Because I can't not hear you, Abigail. Okay. All right. So shall I proceed, or do you want to take a little break first? Okay. Yeah, we can go ahead and proceed then. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here again. I think I'm sharing it here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go to quantum computing workshop with Qiskit, and that really has to do with the Qiskit blocks. So Abigail, I want to make sure that you can see my slides. Can you see my slides here? Okay, good. All right. So another fun thing is in kind of that I created to help people learn quantum computing is this application called Qiskit blocks. And the slides for this talk are here at qisk.it/blocks. And that's where you can find the software that you'll need to download to run Qiskit blocks. And what it is a Minecraft-like environment for learning quantum computing. So it's a tool that I put together for teaching quantum computing. And I'll just go through the slides a little bit here. Wanted to give you a really quick introduction to quantum mechanics, and then show you Qiskit blocks itself. So a lot of this is just kind of introductory kind of stuff. You've kind of been through a lot of this, but I did want to go through the axioms of quantum mechanics really quickly with you. And I try to do that in a kind of a fun way, in the context of grumpy cat. And so I have this microscopic cat, and sometimes he's happy and sometimes he's grumpy, but I've never observed him in between those two states. And so that gets me into the first principle, which is called the superposition principle, that my cat can be in any combination of grumpy and happy. Of course, that superposition principle, this happy cat is actually a 1 qubit, and this is a 0 qubit. But the superposition principle says that my cat can be in any combination of grumpy and happy, and geometrically I can represent any quantum state, any pure quantum state, involving one cat on this unit circle. And if this is a two-dimensional vector space where the first dimension is grumpy and the second dimension is happy, and I could represent, for example, a cat that's in this position here as a state vector of 1 on the grumpy axis and 0 on the happy axis. Or I could represent him on here, the happy cat, as 0 on the grumpy axis and 1 on the happy axis. But then also that's all classical. But then I could also represent him as 1/3, the root of 1/3 on the grumpy axis and the root of 2/3 on the happy axis. And so I would represent him this way in a vector, and also represent him this way using Dirac notation. So the coefficients then are root over 1/3 grumpy, root over 2/3 happy. And so those are just those coefficients are just simply the amplitudes here on the grumpy and happy axes. So that's the first one. The first axiom is that my cat can be in any superposition of grumpy and happy. The second axiom is unitary evolution. So my grumpy cat, for example, can evolve into a happy cat by using a gate. So it's a quantum operation. And the gates can be modeled as matrices. So this X gate, for example, can take a grumpy cat. Remember, the grumpy cat is 1 on the grumpy axis, 0 on the happy axis. If I take this X gate, which is this matrix, then if I multiply those, then I get a happy cat, one that's happy, 0 on the happy grumpy axis, 1 on the happy axis. And a little trick to multiplying matrices by vectors, where you have what's called a one-hot vector, where one of the elements in the vector is 1 and the rest are zeros, is you can just pick out the column that corresponds to the row that the 1 resides in. So the 1 resides in the first row, so I can just pick out the first column, and that is the answer. So the X gate with this matrix turns, I can model the X gate by this mathematical operation, this linear algebra operation. So that's unitary evolution. Another example of unitary evolution would be the Hadamard gate, where we put cats into equal superpositions. So if I start with a grumpy cat, put him through a Hadamard gate, then I can get a cat that's in an equal superposition of grumpy and happy. And that is also a gate. This is the Hadamard gate. Here's the grumpy cat. And we pick out the first column, and that's our result. So our cat is in an equal superposition of grumpy and happy as a result of the Hadamard gate. So the third axiom is measurement. With measurement, the probability that I'll see a grumpy cat or a happy cat is just the amplitude squared. So here the amplitude is root over 1/3, root over 2/3. But when I observe this, we would see with 1/3 probability, because to square the square root of 1/3, all we do is take away the radical. So there's a 1/3 probability that if my cat is in this quantum state, a 1/3 probability that I'll see a grumpy cat, and a 2/3 probability that I'll see a happy cat. And so then I could have more cats, etc. Like here we've got 2 cats, and to then be able to represent 2 cats, we take a tensor product between the 2 cats, and we end up here with a 1 beside grumpy, which is what we've got here. So that quantum state is 1, 0, 0, 0. Or actually, yeah. And then we could have multiple cats that maybe one's grumpy, one's happy, and then here we have this quantum state of 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, where the 1 is beside the grumpy happy combination. And we just took the tensor product to do that. And then we can kind of put those together, where we start out with maybe a grumpy, 2 grumpy cats, and then we use some quantum gates to manipulate their quantum state, more quantum gates, and then when we measure, then here with 1/2 probability, we would see grumpy and happy. Here with 1/6 probability, we would see happy and grumpy. And then here with 1/3 probability, we would see only happy cats. But notice there's no probability where we would get grumpy. And so that's the superpositions, evolution, and measurement, kind of putting all those together, just as an example. And then the next phenomena that I'd like to talk about, it's not an axiom, but it's a phenomena, and that is quantum entanglement. And so that's what Einstein called spooky actions at a distance. The idea then is we have a cat, maybe Alice, and we have a cat named Bob, and then we have this circuit diagram. And Alice, we apply a Hadamard gate, and at the end of applying the Hadamard gate, our quantum state then shows that Alice is in a superposition of grumpy and happy, but then Bob is just full on grumpy. But our quantum state is 1/2 probability, is the square root of 1/2 of grumpy, Bob being grumpy, Alice being grumpy, and then square root of 1/2 Bob being grumpy and Alice being happy. So that's our quantum state. If we measured that, that's the only 2 possibilities. But then we can apply a C0 gate to where the bottom wire only flips when the top wire is high, or when Alice is happy. So whenever Alice is happy, Bob flips to being happy. And so now we have this state to where there's a 1/2 probability of Bob and Alice both being grumpy, and then a 1/2 probability of Bob and Alice both being happy. But there are no other choices in that quantum state. There's no other possibilities for measurement. And that's called a Bell state. That's one of the 4 Bell states. And so we notice that in this state, if we take a measurement and we come up with this eventuality, then they're both happy. If we take a measurement and we come up with this eventuality, they're both grumpy. And so they are entangled. They're highly entangled. So, for example, if Alice got in a spaceship and flew to Venus, Bob got in a spaceship and flew to Mars, and if we observed Alice on Venus and she was happy, then there's a 100% probability that when we observe Bob, that he's happy. Conversely, if we observe, for example, Bob and he's grumpy, then there's a 100% probability that Bob's grumpy as well. So that's just quantum entanglement. And those can be represented by matrices as well. Here's the Hadamard gate, which we've seen. And then here's the C0 gate, which is a 4x4 matrix, 2 to the second power by 2 to the second power matrix that then models what's going on with the C0 gate. So that's the idea. And what I'd like to show you now then is just give you a brief tour of the Qiskit blocks, which I've used countless times in different workshops and presentations for people to get up to speed on quantum computing in Qiskit. And I find that sometimes the younger the audience are, the more they like to play this block mining game and really pick up on the concepts. This is a 10-year-old that won one of the challenges, beat the rest of the high schoolers in one of these challenges. So if you look at the documentation here, let's see, where is it? Yeah, at Qiskit blocks. So here's a link. Then it shows you how to install and get this thing running. And what I'd like to do then is just kind of show you it running. Here's a slide on how to get around the world. WASD goes forward, left, back, and right, etc. And so there's lots of places in the world, but what I'm going to show you mostly is some escape rooms that I've created that are a little bit like Portal 2 escape rooms. So I've created a world. I called it Abigyan because he's awesome, and so I'm playing the game here. So when I get into the game, when you start out in this room. Tell you what, I'm gonna go over to. I want to go over just to make sure that we're okay as far as questions here. Yeah, we're good. Okay. All right. You start out in this room that has a bunch of blocks in it, and this room just kind of has a lot of documentation as far as what these different gates do. So you can right click on these to find out what they do. And you can go outside if you wanted to and fly around. And there's just lots of things in this world. There's a quantum circuit garden where you can go solve puzzles or solve quantum circuits. Over here, I'll just go over here real quick. Over here is what I call chasm, and there's some teleportation circuits and things like that in there. And over here is a cat sandbox. It's got quantum circuits in it, but they're got cats on them rather than zeros and ones qubits, and so you can go around and play with those. I'll let you do that. I'll go back in the world here. Go back in the main room. And I'll just go right here. There's a mine cart here. I'll show you a little bit more of the room. And so here's a bunch of puzzles down here, and I'll show you some of these. But these are actually from level 2 that kind of teach you some of Grover's algorithms. So I guess I better get back in the cart and go where I was. Or I could just jump the wall, I guess. I'll just go over there. There we go. Okay. I'll go back in here. but the puzzles, the puzzle rooms, the Portal 2 style puzzle rooms are actually in this TARDIS. So if I go into this TARDIS, there's a portal hub, and that's the portal hub. And so there's several levels here. I've got 2 of the levels built out. Each of those levels have 16 rooms in them. And there's kind of a foundational level, and then here's one that teaches quantum logic. So I'll just go into this one. I'll jump into that portal. And then here we are in the main room, in the first puzzle room. And notice in the upper left-hand corner, it's got instructions from Professor Q. Professor Q's over there. She's over there, kind of watching everything you do. And so up on upper left-hand corner, it says, "Hello, test subject. Esteemed colleague, my name is Professor Q, and I'm standing behind this glass because we're going to try an experiment. For this experiment, change the quantum state of the circuit from 0 to the state shown on the wall." So I see here's the quantum circuit, and the quantum circuit is, we see a liquid block here that signifies that there's a 100% probability that if I measure this circuit, that it's going to be 0. And that makes sense because, there's one wire in this circuit, and it starts out at 0, and we've done nothing to change that, so it's going to stay at 0. But on the wall, it says we want to have a quantum state of 1. So here the liquid block is 100% filled on the 1. And here it's just showing us that, in order to leave the room, you need to do this. So over here is the door for the room, and notice that it's closed. So in any good block world game, there's going to be a chest. And so here we can open this chest. I can right click it, open the chest. I can drag there's just one block in it, in this particular chest. I can drag it to the hot bar. The hot bar is the top bar there. And then hit escape and leave. So now I've got the X gate. I'm wielding the X gate. And I'm going to right click on that X gate, and that's going to change this. That's a Blocksphere. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but change this from 0 to 1, and notice that the probability now is that we would measure 1. And so the Q turned gold, the Q block turned gold, which says that we solved the puzzle, and then the doors open. So now we can go over here, and we can go to the next challenge. So if I look at the text up there, it says, "Now let's play with multi-qubit circuits like this one. Please make its quantum state match the one on the wall." And so where's the one on the wall? Oh, there it is. Okay. So we start out with a quantum circuit of 0, 0, right? Because there's a 100% probability that if we measure it, it'll be 0, 0, because there are no gates on here to change that. And notice that the bottom wire is magenta. It's like a purple color. The top wire is a yellow color. And they're kind of color coded so that you remember that the most significant qubit, which is the one on the left here, is actually the bottom wire. So magenta matches magenta there. And so what it's saying is, as a result of the circuit, the gates that you put on that circuit, it wants you to make the state 100% probability that a 1, 0 will be measured. So how do we do that? So we go over to the chest. We see, not surprisingly, another X gate. And so if we want this to be 1, 0, and right now it's 0, 0, then we would need to put an X gate right here. And now it is 1, 0. And our block is gold. and we can leave if we can find the door. There's the door. So now we go to the third one, and really we have more of the same, except for the puzzle is 3 wires. So with 3 wires, we have 8 basis states, but we start out at 0, 0, 0 because we've done nothing to change that, but we need to get it to 0, 1, 1. So to do that, not surprisingly, we would pull an X gate out of here, put it here, and wield it. Let's see, 0, 1, 1, so 0, 1, 1. Now it's turned gold, and our quantum state is 0, 1, 1, 100% probability of measuring 0, 1, 1. Our door happens to be behind the circuit, so I'm just going to climb up the ladder here, jump over the circuit. Oops. Climb up the ladder, jump over the circuit, and now we're into more quantum puzzles. Those first 3 were just classical, but as it says up here at the top, this room is where Schrodinger's cat starts getting nervous. Please put the qubit in an equal superposition of dead and alive. I mean 0 and 1. So here we start out at 0, but on the wall it says that we want an equal superposition of 0 and 1, and that is the plus state. So we go over here to the chest, pull out an H gate, because remember, H gates are great at putting cats and qubits into equal superpositions. We'll wield that H gate, and now it is in an equal superposition of 0 and 1, and we see this this dot on the Blocksphere being on the equator of that Blocksphere. And so I wanted to show you real quickly in the presentation that there is a link to a Blocksphere Playground. So you can go to this link called Grok the Blocksphere, and it shows you a visual representation of a Blocksphere, and then you can play with different gates. So here we start out at the quantum state of 0, and then if we, for example, hit the X, then we would be at a quantum state of 1. And so it's just graphically depicting that on a Blocksphere, the result. So now maybe I go back up to 0, but then I'll hit an H gate. So the H gate puts the state from 0, changes it from 0 to the plus state. And actually what's happening with an H gate, it rotates on 2 axes. It rotates on where the bisection of the X and the Z axes. So here, if I look kind of straight down at it, if I do an H gate, notice it goes between the 0 and the plus position. But if I were, let's say, on the 1 position, I'll go down to the 1. I'll just hit an X and get down there. Notice that if I hit the H gate, it goes back to the back of the Blocksphere, because again, it's rotated on that same axis that I'm looking down at right now. So it's going from 1 to the minus. So that's that's a couple of examples of the X gate, or the H gate. And then other things about this visualization is down here is the complex plane. It's showing you the phase. For example, if I went down to H and then rotated around the Blocksphere, rotated the phase, notice that here we're back at a pi phase, 180-degree phase. And over here is a projection on the probability of measuring 0. So right now, there's a 50% probability that I would measure 0. But here, there's a 100% probability. And then here, there's a 0% probability that I would measure 0. And so by playing around with the gates, again, you can see not only phase and relative probability of measuring the 0 here and here by the amount that's filled in. But then you can also see Dirac notation, the probabilities of, or actually the amplitudes, which are just the square roots of the probabilities, absolute value, square roots of the probabilities here. So, and then this is the phase, e to the I over some, e to the I, some angle for the phase. So anyway, this gives you a little playground. So if we look at this, then we can see that the quantum state is on the plus state, and which is what we would expect. So now we've solved that, and we can go through the next door, and we have another one a little bit like it, and it's saying, let's visit the backside of the Blocksphere, a state commonly known as minus, which is this state. And it's noting that the measurements resulting in 0 or 1 are also equally likely in the minus state. Remember, because if we go here, we're still, let's see, if we go to the minus state, we're still on the equator here where we're in an equal superposition. It's equally likely that 1 or 0 will be measured. So the challenge then is using the gates that are in that chest. The challenge is to try to make this state to where it's equal superposition, but we are at the back of the Blocksphere, and the phase is 180 degrees or pi phase. And so how do we do that? Well, let's see what we're working with here. We go here, we've got an X gate and an H gate. And so let's see, which one will we do first? Well, let's just try one, just for the fun of it. Let's try an X gate. Well, what's the X gate going to do? Well, the X gate is going to go from 0 to 1. And now if I do an H gate, remember, it's going to go from 1 to the minus state. And so I've solved the puzzle. But just to demonstrate that those don't commute, that those don't, you're not going to get the same result if you reverse those operations. So, for example, if I started out with the H gate, it goes there. But then if I rotate on the x-axis, to go to the Blocksphere here, if I'm already here in the front of the Blocksphere in the plus state, if I rotate on that x-axis, nothing's going to happen. If I did an x rotation on that x-axis, nothing happens. So I didn't get to the place that I needed to go with this combination, but if I put an H first, put an X first, like I did in the first place, and then an H, then we've solved the puzzle. We're at the back of the Blocksphere. We can go through here to the next one. And so this says, let's take another trip to the minus state, but this time via a different route. And I've taken the liberty of replacing your X gate with a Z gate. So you're going to need to experiment with how to get to the back of the Blocksphere using a Z gate and an H gate. You probably have this figured out already, to where you could put an H gate here, and now I'm at the front of the Blocksphere. And then if I do a Z gate, which is going to rotate 180 degrees or a pi rotation on the z-axis, which is this axis here, the axis that goes up and down, then I'm going to end up at the back of the block sphere at the minus state. So here I'll go ahead and wield the Z gate, put that here. Now we're to the back of the block sphere. We've got a gold Q block, and we can go ahead and go through here. And then we just have more puzzles that are more, just get more complicated each time, teaching different concepts as we go. And so I would invite you to download and play this game, to go through level 1, a little bit of a secret level in room 15 right now. It's Qiskit changed a little bit, and so room 15 you actually can't solve very easily at all. And so what you might do when you get to room 15 is jump through the portal, get back to the portal hub, and then jump into level 2 and play with some of those quantum logic puzzles that help you get up to speed on quantum logic, which then is also a great foundation for understanding, Grover's search and that kind of thing. So go ahead and exit to the operating system here, and I'm going to check to see if we have any questions. Abigail, do we have any questions?
No, mostly the comments are about how great the game is.
I can't hear you at all. I'm not sure why. But yeah, if you could chat the questions, that'd be fine. Okay, no questions. All right. Right. So I guess I'll just wrap up. Go back to the presentation here. As you saw, we can run quantum circuits on an IBM computer for free, and you've probably played with that. If you haven't, you will. And so you can run either on our simulators or real quantum computers by going to this quantum composer or actually going into the IBM Quantum Lab notebooks, and you can play with those. Please reach out with any questions that you have as you continue to move forward. I would welcome any questions that you have. I would welcome, you reaching out at the address I gave you earlier. And speaking for Brian, it's been our absolute pleasure in addressing this group. And I guess with that, I'll just thank you for your time and turn it back to Abigail.
Yeah, thank you, James. Thank you, James. And I would like to express my thanks to Brian as well, although he's not in the stream right now. But if he watches it later, I would like to thank him for joining us. And this would mark the end of the day 2 in this last session. After this, we would be meeting after the hackathon ends, and when we'll announce the results. So looking forward to a great hackathon. Again, reminding each participant that there will be an email sent to your registered email account in which we have assigned a team to you. So please go through that, and if you have any issues related to that, please reach out to us on the team formation channel on Discord. And by that, I would like to wish all the participants all the best. And you can I would like to both of these projects, you can work on extending these projects. All the codes are available. these are open source projects, totally open source, so you can go ahead. I will share the link to both of the projects and the presentation. You can go ahead and have a look at the project. You can get inspired by it. You can contribute to the project. That will also be marked as a valid submission, like if you want to add something to the already existing projects. So by that, I would like to wish all the participants all the luck, and looking forward to a great hackathon, and I hope you enjoyed. And thank you, James, again for such a lovely session.
Yeah, thank you. I would as far as how you can best contribute to Quantum Music Playground, what I would suggest is to to actually create a musical composition. That would be a great way to contribute to that one. As far as the Qiskit blocks, a great way to contribute there would be to just go and play with it and then give send your feedback as far as what your experience was. That is for learning and for also to help inspire maybe games that you might want to create. So anyway, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me out again.
Thank you, James. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.